Thank you for joining our session today. This is maybe the 8th session we've done in this Open to Buy merchandise planning series that we host here. Each time we meet, we're talking about retail, we're talking about typically merchandise planning, and today's topic is quite specific. We're talking about hierarchy trade-offs, and we're talking all about finding the right level of complexity. You don't want to have too much complexity, but you also don't want to have not enough. So before we get to it, some quick housekeeping. We are recording this session as always, and afterwards, each person who registered will receive the recorded link. We also encourage questions. There is a question pane on the webinar pane on the side there. Feel free to ask any question. We really do like it to be collaborative, so much so that next month we are probably going to be hosting the next session not on the GoToWebinar platform, because we really want our attendees to be able to interact, talk, ask questions, and not just have to type into the question pane. But for today, we're still using the webinar platform, so you'll have to drop those questions in the pane. But again, feel free to interrupt us, ask questions. We will keep a close eye on it, and we really want to make it collaborative. With that, I am going to jump in. Some quick introductions. I'll just go through, since we have so many experts on the call today, a quick introduction of each person. We have Dr. Michelle Burton, Assistant Professor of Merchandising from Montclair State University. We have Jeff Sward, Founding Partner of Merchandising Metrics. Dmitry, CEO of Ant USA, and then of course Jeff Dillon, Director of Operations from Ant USA. And I'm Michelle Salerno. I'm the Chief Growth Officer here at Celerant. I will say this, you've got some real experts on this call. These folks are merchandise planning gurus. So there's a lot to learn and a lot that you will hopefully walk away with today. So I want to take a minute and let each of our panelists just introduce their companies so we can learn a little bit more about what they offer. We'll start with Jeff Sward.
Hey, good morning. I'm Jeff Sward. I'm the founding partner of Merchandising Metrics, My background includes department stores, Macy's and Saks, specialty stores, Abercrombie and Fitch and American Eagle. I've developed and sold private label to Walmart and Costco and Nordstrom. And I've wholesaled products with brands like Polo Ralph Lauren and Tommy Bahama. So when it comes to merchandise planning, I come at it from lots of different angles. So glad to be here. Thanks.
And I think, Jeff, I have to update that little logo there, because Rethink Retail Top Retail Expert, you just got, I think, 2026 as well, right? So I think every year, yes. Well, we are honored to have you here. And Dr. Michelle Burton.
Hi, my name is Michelle Burton. So happy to be here. Prior to going into academia full-time, I worked in the retail industry for a couple of decades for Nordstrom, JCPenney, Claire's, several retailers. So mainly within the apparel and shoes space. So at Montclair State University, I have the pleasure of working with students daily. We have over 250 students within fashion design and fashion merchandising. So if you are looking for interns, please definitely reach out to me. All of our students are required to do an internship to graduate. So would love to speak with you, or any kind of collaborations if you're interested in just needing some support. I try to incorporate experiential activities as much as possible and connect our students as much as possible. So glad to be here on another webinar series. So thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. And then Ant USA, I think Dmitry is going to take this one.
Hi, so we are actually merchandise planning wonks. Merchandise planning, open to buy, and related, what I would call numeric planning for non-food retailers. We've done everything from department store implementations to, category killers and discounters and farm and ranch and shoes and apparel. And so we bring kind of a very broad perspective. In just as a general As a general approach, we like to simplify things as best as we can. And Jeff and I will we'll talk through the topics that we can address together.
Awesome. And I've known Dmitry for, I think, close to 20 years now, and we've been integrated at Celerant with Ant USA for just about most of that time. And so again, I'm Michelle with Celerant. A lot of the retailers on this call are already using our platform, many are not, but we are obviously retail software. So a full solution for in-store and online, even digital marketing. We've been at it about 26 years. I'm with Celerant now almost 21 years. And we have two platforms. Stratus Enterprise is our more advanced retail solution, and Cumulus Retail is our lighter, more cost-effective solution for the smaller merchants. All right, we are going to get to it here. We have a lot of different topics to cover, and everything is about merchandise hierarchies. First, we're going to really jump into finding the right level of complexity, and that goes right along with the 80-20 rule, right? You want to spend time on what really matters and build structures around products and categories and vendors and attributes that actually drive business. Dmitry will walk us through his 5 rules of thumb for your different layers. And then Michelle is going to walk us through some sample hierarchy designs. You can compare that to what yours might look like. And then, of course, Jeff Sward is going to walk us through risk. I will say the conversation of understanding risk is its own session and will be our next session, actually. But we will get into the high-level aspects of it and just talk about finding that right balance, which is really a lead-in into our next deep dive session. We like to ask a poll question and just get everybody engaged. And of course, for us, we like to know who's on the call, and then it helps us sort of guide our conversation and where we take the discussion for today's live session. So the first question here is, what brought you here today? So let me launch this poll. All right, so what brought you here today? First answer, I'm here to learn what others are doing, or understand why hierarchies are important, or I want to simplify my hierarchies. Maybe you feel everything is just too complex and you need to really just give it a revamp. Maybe you want to expand. Maybe you feel you're not complex enough. And then the last option is just here to learn whatever I can. Nothing super specific, just really want to learn more. So go ahead, I see 50% of the votes are in. So I'll keep it open for a few more seconds. Go ahead, if you haven't answered yet, just select which answer is most applicable to you. We're at 65%. I'm gonna give it 3 more seconds. Oh, there we go, more are coming in. Okay, I am going to close it and share the results. Dmitry, go ahead and read what we got. 56% here to learn whatever they can.
So this is great because we're here for the same reasons. We have opinions and we have experience, but personally, I learned from every implementation. And merchandise hierarchy is a key tool and a key concept. So let's talk through what other people are doing and why. Okay.
Yep.
That's excellent.
Perfect.
All righty. So Jeff Dillon is going to kick us off talking about just the right level of complexity. It sounds easy, but it's more challenging than it is.
I'm trying to set the stage here for what the rest of the presentation will focus on, where we have examples and a little bit more details. But all of us here on the panel have experienced the widest variety of hierarchy of beliefs, structures, behaviors, disciplines that you can possibly imagine. And we'll get into it, but we're here to guide you on on what a solid hierarchy looks like and why it should look like that, and support decision making. Why is this thing there, this hierarchy thing, and how does it help with decisions, and what decisions does it help drive? And it's really, back to Michelle, Jeff, and Dmitry's comments, it's retail math is really what it's all about, and supporting retail math and making quick, easy reads and decisions of what's coming in your door. And what I mean by that is, sure, we're tracking sales in 5 different ways in the business and 5 different departments doing it in their different ways, and we want to see what sales were. Well, we want to see what sales were to plan also, and we want to see what sales were to last year, and we want to see what sales were to all these other dynamics. And having your hierarchy built well helps you decide, should I be growing an area of my business? Is there a growth trend here? Should I be shrinking an area of my business? Should I walk from a layer of my business, i.e., travel accessories? It all steers you towards quality business decisions. So in the considerations of hierarchy, build it to match the size of your business. We'll get into that. Build it to be usable. Build it to be something that you do embrace and refer to and use as a planning and reflecting decision tree. Go to the next slide for me, Michelle. And we talk about this every day also, but Pareto is so alive and well and well in retail data. Make dang sure you're putting the energy where it belongs. And this applies to your hierarchy and the analysis of your hierarchy. We have a lot of exposure to people with 5 levels of a hierarchy, and within those levels 100 it's like, oh my gosh, how can you possibly do anything with that without an army?
Don't overcomplicate it.
All right, so don't overcomplicate it. And back to the math. We in our tool set can offer you dozens and dozens and dozens, I'm up to 100 now, dozens and dozens of metrics and values and slices and dices. Please don't bring in any more than 5 or 8 into your view. Choose the numbers that are meaningful to your building, your room, your business, your shared discussions in your business with marketing and operations. Come up with a set of metrics that really matter, and try to not experiment occasionally. Sure, see if there's something else out there, but don't dwell on too much, both in your hierarchy or in the data within your hierarchy. Focus really on the big numbers.
All right, this next slide I love. What, why, and how?
Okay, let me
everything I have to say, everything Jeff just said sounds so logical, right? It just sounds so simple and obvious, but it's not, right, when you get down into it. So help us kind of unpack this, Dmitry.
So I sort of mentioned this is trauma from a couple of 100 implementations, right?
Trauma,
of
PTSD.
trauma, right? Professional deformation. So it all comes down to these 3 questions. It's a really simple way to think about performance and the future. So let's pull it apart, right? What is the typical reports, right? When you filter, when you sort, when you drill down, especially, right? All the reports are designed to answer what? What happened? Did I sell? Did I not sell? Right? Was the store performing? Was the store not performing? What? That's like the first level of any form of analytics, whether you're looking at the future, which is planning, or you're looking at the past, which is historical, what are my best sellers, right? Or you're looking at post-mortem, which is sort of historical against expectations, right? So actuals versus plan. That's a what. And once you find out what, and Jeff's 80-20 rule is exactly about that. I focus on the big numbers. Because the classic thing is I have a green bar report in the past and it have 500 pages, and people literally sat there going, I'm sure people remember this, right? Doing this, the what, right? Sorting helps, filtering helps, AI helps some. That's still a what. Once you find what happened, you got to figure out why. Why did this product sell? Why did this store overperform or underperform? Why did this particular vendor do well? And that why begins to complicate. Essentially, the essence of planning and related analytics is all about the why. How do my sales and stock relate? How do my price points relate? How do my, did I take markdowns last year in April and therefore my sales were boosted above normal? Did I run out of inventory and I'm down to 3 weeks of supply, 1 month, and 12 weeks of supply another month? These relationships between various KPIs are your classic category planning worksheet, right? That's a why. It's got a sales, it's got the stock, it might have price points, it might have units, it might have a gross margin, historical, it might have, stock to sales or weeks of supply or sell through or whatever it is. Those are all whys. So a lot of our business is actually in the why. A lot of the planning is in trying to figure out not just what happened, but why it happened. That's multivariable analysis. And for those people who are on the call worried about AI taking your jobs, AI cannot hold a candle to this yet. Because a classic example is I was doing planning with executives in a fairly large corporation, actually earlier this week or Friday, I don't remember. And we were talking about, I don't know, casual pants or something like that. I was like, why are you turning casual pants twice as slowly as tops? And the answer was because the owner went into the store and he couldn't find his pair of pants, and he wants us to broaden the assortment, and we're buying twice as much as we would have bought otherwise. And that's a valid answer. Go get AI to explain that.
Yeah, AI
right?
would never know that.
Right? Or you had the sidewalk in front of your store dug up, or a hurricane came through. You can imagine we can already pull in like weather-related stuff, to expand on the why. But generally, people tend to know so much about the business that when you try to capture all those data points into the why, it overcomplicates. Basically, just even the best AI systems go gaga on that, right?
Well, and I think using AI is important, and I think it's going to really help make the process so much more efficient. But you still need that human interaction, and you still need that touch.
Absolutely. So AI really helps nowadays with what? Right? I can run through 10,000 sales records like that, right? But trying to figure out the why, especially if you're collaborating with other people, that's the magic, right? And then once you know why, it's useless unless you can figure out how. How do I solve that, right? Or how do I repeat that?
Yeah.
Right? So if it's outperforming, right? Why is it outperforming? How do I continue to outperform? Or how do I spread the success? If it's underperforming and I figure out why, how do I fix that, right? So all of this comes down to what, why, and how. That's it. Very, very simple, right? Now let's go look at some of the ideas of how. Let's go to the next slide and look at some of the ideas of this is born out of a lot of pain. This is like I'm really opening the kimono saying there are scars, bullet holes, and what have you, right? So I'm just going to tell you how it works, right? Because we have people that have 8-9 levels of product hierarchy, in a $30 million business, and they would never look at at the lowest level of detail. And we have other people that run $500 million business, and all they worry about is department and class, and so therefore they're leaving. Like it's too shallow and it's too deep. So I'm going to give you some. This is some basic. I stepped on those garden rakes so many times. You don't have to, right? So first, keep parent-to-child ratios roughly around 10 to 15. We see a lot of scenarios where you have 50 departments, right? Company to department, 50 departments. Very, very difficult. That's a very unbalanced scenario. Or you have a department that has 3 classes. That's kind of a wasted level of hierarchy in many cases. We have some clients that start their hierarchy at the vendor level, and that's a whole other level of pain because you end up with 300 to 500 vendors at the top level of the hierarchy. Think about this kind of a well-balanced pyramid is 10 to 15, maybe 17, something like that, 7 to 17, 10 to 15. So that's, if your hierarchy doesn't look like that, look at it carefully because you're really leaving yourself exposed to either not enough detail or too much noise, right? That's the first one. Second, we see a lot of scenarios where, in fact, I was working with somebody on Tuesday, right? And they have a department, right? It might do like $20 million, whatever, right? And they've got 3 classes. And one class is like 60% of the business, right? So what really happens is people plan that one class, so people think about that one class, and they go, the rest doesn't really matter. You could be leaving millions of dollars worth of decisions if unattended to, if if the weight of your children is out of balance. So, very careful. Typically, you look at it by sales, right? Look at it and ask yourself whether or not, there are classes within a department or subclasses within a class or something like that. Vendors are overweighing some of the others, in which case, the big ones need to be broken up. Probably the small ones should be consolidated, and it improves decision-making dramatically. That's the second rule, right? It's a little bit like if you have, multiple children, you got to love all your children equally, right? You can't have one that has 65% of your love. That doesn't work well. Okay. Third, people confuse hierarchy. A merchandise hierarchy is designed as a set of abstraction levels. In fact, I'm working on a white paper on that. So an abstraction level is something that allows you to not think about the detail, right? So it applies for anything from physics to personal life to retail and so on and so forth. So abstraction levels have to be solid. So if you've got assignments that change all the time, those are attributes. So sometimes people would become very popular nowadays, for example, is include vendor in the hierarchy, right? And vendors, if they're in the middle of your hierarchy, destabilize the hierarchy. So if you have department, class, vendor, and then within that vendor you have, types or subclasses and so on and so forth, very often vendors come and go if you're multi-branded. And that really means your hierarchy is unstable, right? In other words, not only do the lower levels of the hierarchy fragment across multiple vendors, and you have, 5 variations of a subclass or something like that, right? Or 15. But again, because vendors come and go, and you're looking at it, and you want to look at history, you miss out. Same with seasons, collections. So there's a reason why traditional sort of division, department, class, grouping products by stable affinity rules applies. Okay. We sometimes see hierarchy structures not aligned. That's a really bad thing. So if you have more than one fascia across your brand, you have a division, different business divisions, they have different hierarchies. You end up with different merchandising systems in the process, and sometimes you end up with different hierarchies because you you have merchandising systems. You should work with somebody that's really good at it, like Celerant, and make sure that they cover, that the product hierarchy stays the same. The product hierarchy can cover e-com, and it can cover the stores, and it can cover different store types. Very, very important. Okay. And then the final thing I would say is people go, as I mentioned at the beginning, either too shallow. Yeah, 500 million department class. Okay, I might have 300 classes and 70 departments, but that's all I want to plan. That's not enough. Or I'm going to go down to size, color, SKU, and I will never look at size, color, SKU because each one of those is worth like, $20. So most people do well for planning. And by the way, planning also means reporting, and it's kind of top-down analytics with 3 or 4 levels of detail. So those are I'm passionate about this stuff because, again, I've had plenty of bruises.
And I'm curious too, for the sake of being collaborative, everybody on the call, if you want to drop in the chat area, drop in there how many levels you have in yours, so we get a feel, for who's on the call and how deep yours goes.
I want to add one little thought too that I can't shake yet. We might talk about it later again,
Yeah.
but there's also the discipline in your enterprise about assigning then these levels well to your products and SKUs. And one of the most common errors we get in our data loads is items not attached at certain levels in the hierarchy. And it's laborious, it's a process. There's more often than not a project to clean what exists, but every little fish hook all the way down to the very bottom at the tiniest little SKU, assure that all of its hierarchy levels are populated in your database.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. All right, Michelle, you're going to walk us through what a clean hierarchy design looks like. And then on the next slide, we're going to go a little bit deeper, but take us through it.
Right. I just want to first start by saying one of the things you want to think about, so some might have hierarchies in place. So even if you think like, okay, I've got this, you might want to take a look and re-examine what you have to make sure it aligns with what we're talking about. And also for those of you that might be starting from scratch, so you want to think about company first, division, department, class, and subclass. So this is going to really make sure you have clarity across the entire organization. That's important. So eliminating kind of chaos. And I also want to emphasize, it's good to potentially, like if you're starting from scratch, or even if you're not, getting all the major players in, like, I don't think that this is just one single team's responsibility to look at this. Like, this is a more high level conversation where we think about, okay, how are we defining division? How are we defining department? How are we defining class and subclass? A couple other notes I had that I wanted to make sure I covered. So this also ensures that everyone understands what's going on at every level of the organization. So when we're talking about department, we all know what that means across the organization, from marketing to planning to buying, whatever areas. When we're talking about class, we know what we're talking about. So I think I'm gonna go, can we go to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so here is an example. So as you can see, company, and this is fictitious company, Acme Apparel Company. Then when we talk about going into division, women's, men's, kids. When we talk about going into department or level 3, tops, bottoms, outerwear, class, trousers, denim, shorts, subclass, slim fit, straight fit, relaxed fit. So there are a couple things. First, this is a very clean roll up, but what it allows you to do is when you're pulling reporting, you can look and you can say, okay, how are, for example, tops doing across women's and men's category? It also allows you to see things like, oh, we have outerwear in kids, but maybe we don't have it in men's and women's. Is that an area of opportunity? There's a couple other things I wanted to talk about. Nope, I think that's it. I also want to talk about, this is really good for planners too, as you're looking at planners and buyers work together, ensuring that we're talking the same language. And then also, this is very customer centric, which I think I wrote down, Jeff, you talked about this earlier as well, and talked about this as being kind of like, Jeff Dillon, a decision tree. So that's how you want to think about this. That's it. That's it.
I want to add also, you know, Dmitry, you mentioned, you know, at Celerant, but we can help, right? We can help our retailers create what makes sense for their business. We have different hierarchies that are already built out depending on the different vertical markets. Of course, it's going to look a little different for each of our retailers, but we can absolutely help build this out with you for your business. And we did have a couple of responses. I'll read one of them. Again, now that you've seen this hierarchy example here, just drop in however many levels, I should say, you have. But we have Jessica wrote, one level, recently had a buying analysis show me how inefficient it is. So Dmitry, do you want to add any flavor for that for Jessica? Any advice?
So, you know, going back to this general idea of part of the why, remember what, why, how, right? Part of the why is drilling down. Hierarchies are set up to hide the detail and to provide stable answers. So if you have one level, you're really shortchanging yourself big time, right? Either your one level numbers are so large that that it hides the detail, or they're so small that you're looking at the equivalent of this 500 pages. Hierarchies are designed, you know, the most extreme, think about it this way. You're buying SKUs all the time, right? And, you know, this SKU comes, this SKU goes, another SKU replaces it. The same is true with many vendors in many cases, especially in kind of closeout businesses, right? So if you're looking at it at the lowest level of detail, there's chaos. I think of retail data as a seething ocean of chaos, right? You want to like abstract from it. You want to be, how does that look from when you're flying over it? Well, it's kind of like nice and stable, right? Are you over ocean or you're over land? So one level of hierarchy is, at best, will give you a what, but it won't guide you towards a why. So I would just kind of, you know, sort things out, at least in sales, and try and group it. Oh, this one is a perennial controversy.
Yes, we might have a little debate on this one, but go ahead. Jeff Dillon, kick us off with customer versus operational logic.
Yeah, it all comes to sort of what Michelle was saying also about, you know, other departments in the building having input into the creation, you know, and maintenance and direction of your hierarchy. And marketing, certainly merchandising, but maybe more so marketing, is going to want a customer-centric hierarchy, right? And certainly the merchants are interested in customer behavior, but they're more interested in product behavior. And then you add in then the channels. Many of us see, you know, different behavior direct to consumer than they do brick and mortar. Then we have wholesale arms also, and then you've got finance, and then you've got all, you know, operations, all these influencers of the hierarchy. What does all that mean? What's the priority? What's the marriage of merchandise planning and finance planning? And it all, you know, and one of the most common certainly is one here is the customer dynamic. So to Dmitry's point, it's a lot of jumbled data and decisions and analysis. What's the right thing to do? What's the right direction? Is there a fit for certain genres of retailers? Do apparel retailers have a different view of their data than hard goods, than sporting goods, than, you know, it's just, this is the stuff we see, we face, and we help direct. And it often takes being asking these tough questions. Yeah.
I want to ask Jeff Sward, who's been awfully quiet so far. When we talk about this customer, and I hate to even say verse, right? It's not verse, but customer or operational logic, where do you sit on this one?
Well, I think that the operational logic should be driven by the customer logic. In other words, the business needs to operate through the eyes of the customer. That, you know, what does the customer think is important? We have to make that important so that customer experience is maximized. It's not about all the backroom stuff. I mean, not that that's not important, but I think that the customer.
Well, I love this line here too. It's not about warehouse storage.
Right.
Not about where you're going to store it in the warehouse. It's about how your customer wants to buy it.
Exactly. So I think that's the pressure test for so much of this is, what does the customer see and feel and experience? And does that mean I should be doing something differently?
And right now, in season, this moment, that retailer Dmitry mentioned has a lot of trousers on the shelf because the CEO said so. What will the customer's vote be, right?
Listen, there's actually a third flavor of this. I'm curious what you guys would think about it. We see people that put buyer above departments, like I'm grouping departments, I want to know buyer totals. That's almost personnel logic, right? And then the other, or the merchant logic, not so much about the customer, because the buyer could own some departments and not others. And then the same is true with vendor. Like if you put a vendor, for example, you know, class, it's become very, very popular lately, where you have, you know, department or class or even subclass broken out by vendor, like that piece of the vendor that's within that class, right? If you put in vendors, that again is hierarchy logic that's merchant or buyer oriented. So there's yet a third dimension of this. One is customer. Are you selling to men, women, kids, unisex, whatever, right? You know, gender is the clearest expression of it for a lot of apparel and shoe. One is operational, right? You know, that's what the hierarchy is driven by finance. And the third one is merchant. The GMM wants to know how the buyers are performing. And the buyer becomes a level of the hierarchy. And then the buyer leaves or gets fired. I'm not doing planning well enough. No, just kidding. And then you have to like reassign everybody, right? So there's a third one yet. What do you stand on that? Like, is that just an expression that the buyers are too powerful in that organization, or is that something else? Where does it come from? Yep, Michelle, what do you think?
Sometimes buyers do rise to a level of maybe being more of a driver than they should, where it becomes their opinion, or they project too much into the future, and they think they're smarter than the customer and are going to show them the way. It's very tough to go wrong when you just listen to the customer.
What do you think, Michelle?
Well, you know, as someone said, marketing always puts the customer first, right? And that's always been my side of the house. So the customer's always first, and I very much think it should follow that logic.
Yet there are always dynamics in any organization, right? Where did the president of that organization come up through? Did they come up through marketing? Did they come up through inventory planning, which has actually happened before? Do they come up through merchandise? You know, and that can help steer all these views in an organization also.
Yep.
So the three power centers is merchants, finance, and operations, right? So you can almost look at somebody's product hierarchy in the planning system and
see where they
figure out, you know, which one's royalty.
Yeah, don't forget
marketing. And I think it also goes back to, I forget, Michelle, which session it was we did last year, where it's collaborative, right? It has to be collaborative, and everybody needs to be working together and sharing perspectives and coming together to create something that makes sense across the board for the business.
I agree with that. If anything, everybody getting in the room and at least having the conversation to
Right.
see where everybody's head is at is important. It's emphasizing collaboration. So whereas everyone might not agree, and I don't know the answer, so to speak, everyone might not agree, but it's good to at least have the conversation and to come to a conclusion of what is right for your organization.
And that conversation in and of itself is often rare.
Mhm.
So 3 levels. So who manages risk better? The depressives, finance, the manics, the buyers, or the skeptics, the operations? Who manages risk better?
Hopefully,
Yeah.
everybody is taking it into consideration. But better, that's a tricky question.
Questionable.
What do you think?
Well, I want to move this into the topic of risk. I don't think I could have made the font any larger. Well, I could have, but it is a very big topic, and it's actually going to be the topic for our next session, next quarter, that we really jump into and really take a deep dive, and understanding all these different layers of risk. And Jeff Sward is going to walk us through this. He has some really great imagery that he's used, and this is just a really good topic for Jeff to walk us through. And by the way, Jeff will really be taking the lead in our next session as we really go into this topic in much more detail.
So I use the word risk here very much on purpose, and that is because in many of my prior lives, it wasn't used enough. Meaning, I'm an apparel guy, and you get a bunch of apparel people in the room talking about fashion, and everybody gets all seduced by the most fashionable novelty product. And nobody ever talks about risk. So now that I've had a chance to kind of zoom out and look at this whole process from more of an arm's length, I think it's a healthy thing just to give risk a seat at the table. And the other way of expressing it, I could have used the word predictability, but risk kind of captures it. And the beauty of this graphic, based on what we've talked about so far, is that it works both from the customer point of view and the retailer's point of view. So the expression here is all about, this graphic came about to help manage the product development process. And so it starts with knowns and unknowns. Where are those products where I have the highest level of knowns, the highest level of predictability, and the lowest risk? Well, that's on basic core product, product that is put on replenishment models, that is managed from min-max models, where you can predict fairly well next week, next month, next season, and next year, because this year's data is going to be useful in modeling everything for the next year. It then graduates down the scale down to products which are most unknown, lowest level of predictability, and highest risk. Because, and again, apparel-based thinking here, the whole point every year is that you've got new product on the floor. And just because you've got a very fashion-driven product that is a bestseller this year, well, design's over in the next room developing next year's version of it. Is anybody talking to them about what's a bestseller this year? Or maybe more importantly, what's a worst seller this year? So that attributes from bestsellers can be translated into forward product. Attributes from worst sellers, you can be sure you don't repeat. The other factor here is shelf life. Back up to basics, where you've got a shelf life where some products can last years. and that predictable model just goes over time. Down at the red zone, you've got shelf life maybe in the weeks or months range. And oh, by the way, the data on that product also only has a shelf life of weeks or months. So if you've got a bestseller in the orange or red zone and can reorder it in season, well, that's great. But if it's a private label product that took 9 months to develop, you can't reorder it. And again, the data on that short shelf life product is not necessarily translatable into the next year. So from a merchandise planning point of view, the real challenge here is, what does your portfolio look like? How much of your total assortment is going to be leveraged into the green zone, the orange zone, the red zone? What's the mix going to be? How leveraged do you want to be into high predictability products? And how much risk are you willing to take on by leveraging into red zone products? That's the merchant's job. That's the plan. That's the buyer's job. Planners can plan known products probably at the SKU level. But in the red zone, you can probably only plan at the category level and then populate it as best you can at the style level.
And what do you, Jeff, what do you recommend for that as far as the balance of low risk versus high risk in your assortment?
Well, it depends on the retailer.
Yeah.
If you're the Gap, you're very much leveraged into the yellow and green zones. There's not a lot of high risk product on Gap's floor. If you're Urban Outfitters, you're very much leveraged into the yellow down to the red zones. There's not a lot of basic product on the floor. So it all boils down to brand promise and who's the customer and what do they want to buy from you and why? What kind of wearing moment is the brand serving? There's no simple answer to that question of what should the portfolio look like. It's a function of what is the brand's brand promise? What is the customer expectation?
There's a dimension to this, if I may just add. There's a margin dimension. If you go back for a second, so I'm looking forward to listening to this. This is wonderful stuff, right? So if you're trading absolute basics, right? Pet food, maybe some form of Zamo, whatever it is, right? Your margins could be as low as 12 to 15%. They're on replenishment, but you give up the margin, right? And if you're trading in-season fashion product, your margin could be in the high 80s before the discounts. Like my wife won't go into the stores with me because I always tell her it's too early in the season, right? Right? And so this is the chase, right? In the ideal scenario, you have reasonably high, like we have a bunch of clients like that. They have margins that maybe are from 35 to 45% on a lot of categories, and they're replenishable. And that's like steady money, right? And then you have others who are like, I'll make my money because I risk everything and I reset my floor every month, and sometimes even more often, and I'm going for maximum margin. So there's this risk dimension, maybe next time. It's like too much for today. I'd love to understand how you think about that as another face of this pyramid. Risk versus margin.
Yeah, there's a whole hierarchy of attributes that run from margin and storytelling and the again, I use the word portfolio and how you blend the whole portfolio. This slide begins to just make more obvious the role that data can play in the more basic products, which is a very high level. And design doesn't have much of a level, much of an assignment because it doesn't change that often. It might not change for years. So it's a hugely data-driven, highly predictable business. You get down into the red zone and data has a very small role. Do the designers even hear from the planners about best sellers and worst sellers? And it is overwhelmingly design creativity driven, which means you don't have a lot of predictability. And the whole point of that yellow oval is trying to beg the question of how can those levels of product become more data driven? And the answer to that lies pretty much in the supply chain, because it all becomes so very time sensitive that if the supply chain can reorder that product or remanufacture it in season, great. If it can't, well, then it can't. So it's a way to challenge not just the design process and the planning process, it leaps over into the supply chain process and challenges the role of the supply chain in helping the business be more data-driven, so that it can be both design-driven and data-driven.
Well, and if this topic is, we're, just for the sake of time, I'm going to keep us moving, but if this topic is interesting and striking a chord, our next entire session will be focused on this, and we're going to really go a lot deeper into this whole conversation, because it really is its own beast. Speaking of beast, Dmitry.
So, I wanted to make sure that people, and maybe this is a whole different topic, right? So, for another conversation. So this is an illustration of a typical product hierarchy. It's since time immemorial. By the way, retail, it goes back to those times probably, right? You're making some of this. There's a huge difference we didn't talk about between steady hierarchy levels and fickle, changeable, flexible product attributes. So this is a way to think about it like this. If a description of the product changes all the time, that's an attribute. Season, is it on replenishment? Is it not on replenishment? Is it full price or is it no longer full price? That's an attribute. If a description of the product is steady, right? It's always a candle, right? And it's always lifestyle, or it's always men's shirts. And that belongs in your product hierarchy. So this is just a way to think about it. People confuse product hierarchy ideas, which again, you want stability, a stone wall, right? With lots and lots and lots of ways of grouping and regrouping product all the time. Those are attributes. And this actually loops right back into design ideas, right? Because, by the way, how do people deal with this? In design is they add how do they redesign a lot of shirts? I add a pocket, right? It's the same shirt. I don't have time to think about it. I just add a pocket, but I've done design. Or I changed the shape of my collar, I've done design, right? So people cheat. If you have too much detail, people tend to cheat. And this is a good illustration of when you have too much detail, you're not going to be able to read it. You're going to just focus on the what, why, and how, hopefully.
And we can see where Dimitri's head was at with these images on this one. All right, we are coming to a close here. So I'm going to ask one more poll question here based on what we discussed today. Do you feel that your hierarchy is too detailed, not detailed enough, in need of more attributes, in need of more internal alignment, or you're just really not sure? So I should have launched this already. Let me launch that. So go ahead and select whichever is most applicable for you based on the discussion here today. Is your hierarchy too detailed, not detailed enough, in need of more attributes, Do you just need more internal alignment, or you're just not sure? And I will say, of course, on the last slide, all of our contact information is here, our direct emails. All of us are more than happy to have a conversation, talk through this, answer any questions you may have, you know, depending on how even you answer this question here, it just will lead into more conversations, and we're happy to have it. All right, we have 45% voted. So if you're still there, I see a lot of people are still there. Go ahead and just select which answer is most applicable for you. We are at 65%. So I'm going to go ahead and close this one and share it. Jeff Dillon, why don't you read this one out for us? The mix.
Well, what this is telling me, predominantly with the last one there, is that there's been some thought stimulated, and you're going to go back and you're going to look at it again. You're going to evaluate what you think you have, and probably participate in our next session. I mean, and of course, reach out to any of us. Glad to always talk about this topic one-on-one.
Yeah, and interesting also that nobody's selected that their hierarchy is too detailed, which is interesting. Good. All right. So our next session, we already picked a date. It will be August 6th. It will be 1 o'clock Eastern. I should have put Eastern on that slide there. This session, we opted to do the morning. Next session, we're going to do a little bit later in the day. And as I already mentioned, it is all about managing risk. We will all be on the session as always, but this will really be Jeff Sward's deep dive session for us next time. And for any of you that are joining us for the first time, we've been doing this now, gosh, over a year. We were doing it monthly. We've now switched this year to doing it quarterly, but you can check out on YouTube the series. The link is there, and you can check out any of our prior recordings because they are all right there on that playlist. And each session, we really dive into a different area, just different aspects of merchandise planning, because there really is just so much to it and so much to cover. And all of our contact info is here. Of course, reach out. We'd love to have more conversations. We have about 2 minutes left, and I did have a couple of questions come through. Feel free to drop any question you have into the question area on the GoToWebinar pane, and we can take those questions right now. Let me get us going with our first question here. How do we maintain hierarchy consistency across our teams and systems? Jeff Sward, you want to take that one?
Well, I think it's a function of coming up with some kind of template that you sit down with the various departments and you pressure test it. You talk about it. You get everybody in the same room and say, look, guys, we need a common language here. We need a way to talk to each other that we all participate in. So let's just hammer it out. I don't think one department can author it. It's got to be pressure tested and embraced by all the end users.
Yes, and
there's always a template, right? There's that template, but then there's the engineering, mindset. When you're setting up a new item, those 5 fields must have values, period. There's no continuing if department category, subcategory isn't filled in, then the setup cannot occur, period. It's templates, it's discipline.
All right, so Mike asks, how often should we review and potentially change our structure?
That's a big one. So quite a bit of people change their hierarchy annually. When basically they do a postmortem and then kind of look at it and say, well, geez, I got to realign it. And I'm not a huge fan of living on the receiving end of that, but that's probably not a bad thing. Sometimes people change hierarchy, once every couple of months. Definitely a bad thing. It's a sign that your hierarchy isn't built right. And some people live without the hierarchy forever, so they should change it as fast as possible until true hierarchy and stick with it. So once a year, probably.
Once a year. And like you said earlier, take some of those variables that are always changing out of it so that you don't have to be constantly making adjustments. All right, we are at time, but I'm going to take one more question. What do we do about products that belong in multiple categories?
A true hierarchy will have each product assigned to one branch of the. So if they belong in multiple categories, that's also an attribute, right? So that product, somehow has affinity, closeness, relationship to some other products. So that probably means that it belongs in a place in a hierarchy, and you're missing an attribute or attributes that describe it.
All right. Well, that wraps us up for today. So thank you everybody for joining and listening in. I encourage everybody to check out the full series on YouTube. To my co-panelists, thank you so much. Dmitry, I know you joined us today from Israel, so now you can get back to your beautiful grandchildren. And we thank you for everyone for joining us. Till next time.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye all.